Howdy to you here. I'm going to turn off my music, but I'm back from Big Sur, and I think I can do this. And I missed you, although it was amazing to be in the forest near the stream camping. And really, I turned off my phone for like 4 days, so that was pretty cool. And speaking of phones, I'm not doing this on Instagram live at the same time today because I decided it was time for a new phone in dropping and breaking my old phone. So I am getting a new phone, but today I'm just doing it on Facebook because I do that on my laptop, and I haven't found a way to do Instagram live on another device. Maybe if you know, let me know. But Instagram has been cool to share this on because I've been getting maybe even more of like my teen friends watching, which is pretty cool. So yes, so I'm back because really I intended this May Mood Lift and Shift to be a 14-day program. And I left after day 12. And I just gave myself permission to come back and give you the last few days, figuring that could work for you if you've been following, if you've been soaking up the tools, and if you want to get what you might have missed. Remember, I've been putting it all on a YouTube playlist. So I've tried to make that easy to find, but let me know if you don't see it here on the group. And that has all the videos of the 14 days so far of this, just really my wanting to share in a first way that I've ever done this, but on this issue that's so important to me. I mean, I don't know if you know that I started in psychology and was in graduate school thinking I wanted to be a therapist and maybe a teacher of psychology years ago. And after graduate school, came to things like yoga and meditation. And here I am 20 years later in my study and teaching. And if you haven't heard me say it before, I've totally learned and remembered for us as a yoga collective that yoga is a system of psychology more than anything. So it's become part of my mission to share more about what yoga actually is and how we can use it, especially with something like mental health, which now more than ever, I think we're all feeling the importance of, whether it's in concern for people we love, in concern for ourselves, in concern for the world, just noticing that this is an issue. And I think one of the first pieces of a yoga, more connected approach with something like mental health is to see that it is important and to be open to that we could play a role in how it's going. That sure, there may be some truth to what we're born with, how we're born, genetics, what we inherit. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's a potential. But we do know now, too, that we can influence how that plays out with how life is going, how life is handled with environmental factors, really. And then so just playing with, as much as we have the privilege, of course, how can we work with that? That we can influence whether or not, even if they're genetic predispositions, whether or not those get triggered, whether or not they get aggravated, whatever we might call it, or whether or not it even is going to happen. And if we've already gotten in an extreme situation or diagnosis, and it's definitely feels like a disorder and is totally ruining your life even, I mean, couldn't help too, because a lot of this is just getting back to some of the yoga look at it all really differently in even how we can interpret our feelings, how we can remember it's all energy, how we can look at the psychology of it all, right? And then how we can play a role in our own psychology. We're starting to see more what's possible with the brain and what's changeable, which is super exciting. So it's really a thrilling time to be alive if you're up for being open to even changing your mind about what you thought or what we thought was true with things like mood and mental health, and how we can play a role is really what this is all about. This program is like, what can we do with ourselves, for ourselves, to ourselves to help, right? And knowing that that's going to affect everybody around us, our partners, our kids, our workmates, our communities, the strangers we encounter, are all part of what's going to be affected by our approaching this like this. So, hello, my beautiful cousin Suzanne is here. Gosh, that's so cool. I love that. I never know who's going to be here. And then when it's someone like one of my cousins, that's just so special. So neat. So thank you for being here, Suzanne. Yeah, but I'm excited about, as much as I'm also impassioned about and even in pain about what we're seeing in mental health with so many people we love, right? Young and older. I'm not going to call any of us old. So, yeah, this is about, and I'm very trying to be respectful, honoring that we all have our own truths on these things. But if you're interested in maybe some more ideas, new ideas, and if you're interested in yoga and meditation, and you'd like to hear how can those things help with mood and mind and mental health, then that's what I'm looking to answer here, and probably with some more creations to come. Because I feel like I've had a chance to see that and learn that and practice that and try that, and I'm still discovering and learning in it myself. I've been really lucky to work with kids of all ages, adults of all ages and stages, and this having been a passion of mine, and then having gotten the chance to study yoga and meditation, is just, I realize I'm a great vehicle to bring this through, and I want to, like, it's on my heart, so here I am. So today's tool is a huge one with how we're feeling, how we're functioning, how our lives are going, that we're all using every day already. That's the big surprise with this tool that I realized, and I'm still always realizing or remembering with myself. But the tool that the yogis teach about and people into meditation, you know, really it's all under the same umbrella, but the power of imagination. And so I want to talk about that and what I now see and understand and play with and want to share about how imagination can help and how it is a tool and how we can use it to help things like mood, mind, and mental health. So yeah, but that first piece, this, because I think probably all of us by now have heard of the idea that you can like consciously visualize something to try to make it happen, right? Like all of us have heard of that possibility, whether we've tried it or not. So we start to become aware of that, like, oh yeah, maybe I can do that. And then maybe sometimes we're doing that, so we think, oh yeah, I'm starting to use imagination. And then we start to even see how, oh, we can even imagine things to help things heal, right? Like even studies being done and things like this to shift things, you know. So there's all this power to consciously on purpose picturing something and what can happen with that. It's like a superpower, right? So that's like the first level of awareness. That was like for me, seeing like, oh, and that's why the yogis build that into their meditation and then, you know, things like that. So, but then you start to realize that so imagination is so powerful and it can create so much. Then we start to realize if you take a look at, I would imagine and bet big bucks that if you take a look at yourself, within yourself, and that's part of what we're doing with yoga and meditation, we're having a chance to even take a look at ourselves, how we are doing what we are doing in that mind, for example, in that imagination. So I would imagine and bet that if you take a look like I have at what is happening within you more often, you'll notice that you're using that imagination all day long, right? It's not like you're just sitting for 30 minutes or 30 seconds. And if you are using it like that, like trying to picture your new home or your next love affair or whatever it is. But then if you take a look, it's like, oh, I'm actually imagining things all day long. But here's the rub, right? I'm imagining terrible things, right? Or I'm remembering and imagining things that happened in the past that I'm regretting or ruminating over or mad about or upset about or sad about or embarrassed about or pissed at myself about. Or I'm imagining the future and picturing the worst things happening, right? Worrying, imagining our kids getting hurt, imagining, we won't have the money for this. The worst things happening, probably, right? And I think somewhere that got built in is some like survival mechanism, probably, to like be aware of worst possibilities, right? Like as a mom, I think you see this where you're walking down the stairs with your baby and suddenly this flash in your mind of like what it would be like if you and the baby fell down the stairs. Like I remember as a mom starting to see myself do that, and I was like, well, that's a terrible thought. But then it's also kind of feels responsible, like, oh yeah, but I should be aware of that possibility, so I'm going to hold the baby differently and whatever. But then again, when you really start to take a look, it's like, oh crap, I'm using that imagination all day long. And probably, yeah, imagining what we're afraid of, what we don't want, what we're worried about. If we have an illness or a sickness or something with our body going on that we're worried about, which, it's like a lot of us usually do have like something that's going on with the body that could be like something we're tripping on, right? So then it's like, how are you imagining that? Are you imagining it healing and disappearing and getting back to wellness? Or are you imagining it getting to that next stage of terribleness? And again, you might think that's like responsible of you to like, oh, I need to be aware it could go there. But then it's like, if you start to own what the yogis teach us, what so many traditions teach us, even, the most traditional in my mind is like, for some reason, referencing the Bible. And even Jesus talked about this, right? All the traditions have talked about this. But yeah, so your imagination is so powerful. It is a power tool. And then we start to see, oh crap, I'm using it like against myself. I'm using it to create what I don't want. I'm using it to make that tumor grow. If that was like one of the scenarios, if we had a tumor, right? Suddenly might be thinking about it more, imagining it more, but probably we're imagining it getting it worse, right? That would be the tendency, I bet, with most of us. And that's where it could become like a yogi approach to, first of all, get that chance to observe. What am I doing in my mind? Remember the basics of what we're doing with meditation and what we're doing in the mind with any form of yoga is just getting a chance to become more of that observer. And that's part of what we're checking out is like imagination and just noticing what is running through the mind, what we are imagining, and with that non-judgment and this being like, oh, that's interesting, or oh wow, I'm keep remembering that terrible fight I had and you're picturing that, or that worst moment with my kids, or that scary thing that almost happened, or it's just really interesting how we're using imagination all day long, but using it in ways that, now what's our topic, using it in ways that make us feel terrible, right? Mood. And using it in ways that can totally affect our mental health, right? And even ways that can affect our lives and actually what's going to happen in our lives, right? Like if we really get into like what we're imagining is even what's happening, if you really want to go there, which I believe. So if you imagine yourself having a terrible day, you probably are more likely to have a terrible day, right? If you imagine yourself having a great day, you're more likely to have a great day, right? So that's like a yogi flip right there, is that you just first of all would observe and notice like, whoa, how am I using imagination? And then the yogi invitation would be to gently flip the mind to the opposite, right? What you do want. And remember, those feelings were guidance. So that's the helpful thing too, that when we're feeling off, when we're feeling bad, we can usually take a look at like what we're thinking, what we're imagining, and probably usually see we're thinking, imagining about things that we don't want, right? Or that are really different than like how we really want to feel about it, or maybe different than like a loving perspective or even a divine perspective. Remember that maybe your higher self sees it differently. And so maybe those feelings, that's what's so beautiful, is those feelings are guidance. So when we're feeling off, for instance, we could, take a moment, chill out a minute, even just close our eyes, notice how we're thinking, get better and better at just being able to drop in and take a look at the mind and the imagination and how we're using it. So that's the first step. It's just that awareness that we're building when we do that observing and listening. And then we do have the chance to start to refocus, right? To shift towards the opposite and to shift towards what we want. And that goes with us feeling better, right? And even creating more of what we do want, right? Like with a physical diagnosis. Unfortunately, if you're picturing the worst and even feeling bad, unfortunately, it probably is getting worse, right? It's like we know that whatever we put our attention on grows. So it's actually like not even just like, oh, you should play with imagination, but it's like, holy shit, you have imagination, you're using it against yourself probably. And it's probably why you're feeling bad and out of whack. And then even maybe why things in your life are happening the way they are. So I don't know if that, I'm sure that perspective pisses some people off, but if you want to own it for yourself, it may really help, you know, but just starting to see imagination as superpower tool that we're actually using all day long, and that it's more about like reestablishing how we're using it. So yes, more on that beyond just the keeping an eye on how we are using it, right? And gently shifting toward what we do want. But, you know, a cool, like, new idea too with the imagination that I've gotten lately with some of the teachers I'm listening to and learning from is maybe what's even better than, you know, if you knew you wanted something to happen, which I still think this is a good idea. Like if you knew you wanted your body to heal, right? To purposely make time, take time, find ways to imagine that, you know, and get into that feeling even, right? Because then that imagination is going to really start to affect how we feel and change our emotions and even our physiology, right? Which is going to help us heal more, like strengthen our immunity, increase blood flow, circulation. You know, that's what's neat too now, is we now know how that actually does affect the physiology and actually strengthen us and help us heal. So there's so many good reasons to do this, right? But also with the mood, the mind, the mental health, that, yeah, we can start to just notice more, first of all, how we're using that imagination and really start to just become more aware of how much it's part of our misery, probably, in so many ways. And then, yes, playfully finding ways to, sure, you can purposely focus on what you do want and do that in sessions, or just what's exciting too is with the perspectives that what you do want is just naturally going to start to show up in your imagination, right? Or maybe even what your next steps are, or your future even, right? Your future projects. So that's kind of cool to be open to it, instead of you trying to picture what you think you want, to be more open and listening. Remember that important listening day? I think we did a whole day on listening, observing, noticing, being present, right? Because then you start to like catch the good ideas almost, right? And then these just like images just start to show up in your mind. And then you start to like maybe get in this orientation of trusting, like, ooh, that's showing me a little bit of what I want or what's possible or a next step. And so that's really fun that you can play with imagination. It's like a connection to the divine, right? Or like the universe or God or whoever you think you're getting your ideas from, or just your higher self or your best self or your clearest self or your genius or your inner muse or your heart or your soul, right? Or the collective, or, you know, whatever you feel like you like to be tuning into. That imagination gets really fun when we let ourselves create more space and time to like receive the images, right? So, and then, you know, a lot of teachers, I feel like this seems important to bring up, we can also feed our imagination, because if you also look at that word, I love a couple of teachers like Bashar will talk about how if you look at that, imagination almost says straight out that like it's a way to describe, as humans, our imagination is so important. It's like so part of our power and how we're creating, if we really want to get into it, which I do believe, like superpowers level, that you could almost see that word as like it's describing that we're in a magic nation. Like we are a nation of people, like of the whole world, that it's all about like the images we're creating in our minds and how that's playing out. And that's just like the way life is happening, you know, right? So it's like you can really get into this imagination thing as super fun and powerful, but also you want to see like, wow, I also want to make sure I'm not using it against myself, really, right? Or to create the things I don't want and make things worse, right? Or make myself feel bad, right? And, you know, and that's where you know, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anxious, you know, some of the mood things, right? Mental health, you know, take a look at how that imagination's playing a role. And if you could find some playful, loving ways to shift that imagination. Oh, and that's where I was going to say, I feel like it's worth mentioning, like Julia Cameron, who I've talked about as a teacher who is teaching about connection and spirituality and ways to even get more in your creativity through that. And she talks about things like taking walks and being outdoors or going places that really fill you up or doing things that, so you almost do get to fill up your mind with images that like inspire you, and that you can almost like deplete your well as an artist or as a person even. So the more that we do that too is kind of maybe a beautiful way to feed our imaginations. But that could be, you know, right in so many ways. That's where it's probably just really awesome if you can intuitively, even I'm sure the shows we're watching or the, you know, because those are right images that we're focusing on. And sometimes it is really neat that we might be watching a show that has a character that like reminds us of us. I got this from Bashar too. And maybe that's why we're so intrigued with that show and that character, because it's like we're getting a lesson from it. It's like helping us in our own development. So it is a use of our attention and our focus, and it is images that we're putting in our brain, right? So that's super cool. But then also if we're watching stuff that does the opposite or is really tuning us right towards fear or disconnection or hate or anger, and not that those feelings aren't important at times, but if we're struggling with mood, mind, mental health, we might change that, you know, and be like, oh, how could I fill up my imagination more with things that are going to help me feel more aligned, help me feel more connected, help me feel better in especially these realms, mood, mind, and mental health. So I hope you can start to see how clear that really is, you know, like how imagination is playing such a role with the mood. What you wake up and are imagining, you know, and how you start. And that's where I really like to start my days with things that tune me, because me too, I still totally seeing this in myself for sure, where I'm waking up and pretty soon thinking about maybe the one thing there is to worry about in life that day. And then I'm imagining maybe a little bit of what I don't want and seeing the feelings that go with that, you know. So it's like, but I know that my morning practices are going to tune me back to how I want to focus, how I do want to feel, how I do want to imagine, how I do want to function, right? And even how I do want to transmit energy and even have things show up and how my day goes. So, you know, for me, that's where I know if I do things that will tune me back to, remember, that's where it's like anything that reconnects you. And but part of what you're doing with your reconnecting practices, I would say and propose you could see, is taking a look at that imagination and just tuning it more towards, right, what you do want, what does help you function, what does help you heal, what does help you create what you do want. And then also being into that, like receiving the images thing, which is kind of cool, because that, you know, I mean, how many things that are around us now were created because they came in like an idea, right? And then someone acted on it and took the step and created it. So whatever it is, you know, whether it's just how we want to parent our toddler next, you know, maybe some idea comes in, or how we want to plant our garden next, or what we want to put in that book next, or gosh, you know, right, it can go to every detail. It doesn't even have to be like on projects or anything. So yeah, I hope that that helps you and gives you even more judgment when you do notice how you are using it. Laughing, see, that's where the laughing helps me. Like I can gently love myself through that moment with the laughter and the energy shift of the laughter, right? Like, and I'm not, you know, that's just something that I seem to do now. Is more, it's just like laugh at myself as a way to like love myself, I think, and even shift the energy and get a little out of the judgment that I might get into when I see that, yes, once again, I was using that imagination towards what I don't want, or imagining the worst things of the past, or, you know, that just, and maybe, of course, there's importance to a process if you needed to like remember something and then let yourself feel it as a way to heal it too. But, you know, if you're like constantly ruminating over the same things that really, again, make you feel in a terrible mood, that are fucking with your mental health, right? Then, you know, that's where it is about choice and saying, remember, back to the basics, basics, basics. Most foundational things of yoga and meditation are like attention and awareness, right? So that's where, with imagination, the more that we can just pay attention to how we are using it, be more aware of how we are using it, and then we can playfully shift from there, right? And look to kind of refocus, reset, fill ourselves up, reconnect ourselves in ways. And then what's neat too is that as we tune ourselves with these other parts of the practices, you know, whether it's the mat practice or breath or walking or journaling or other things that even help us do the energy medicine to ourselves, the imagination will shift along with the energy shift. So like as we get into a better energy, a higher vibration, just naturally that imagination is going to come with you, right? So the kinds of thoughts, the kinds of things you're picturing will even just improve. So you don't even have to go after it as just like straight attacking your imagination and trying to like wrestle it, you know. It could be about how can you help yourself feel better? How can you help yourself reconnect, right? Remember, that's where it's like, that's what yoga means, union. That's all. So whatever it is, it might even be petting your dog, right? Or just like sitting with your eyes closed with your cup of coffee for 5 minutes. And or maybe bringing to mind, if you're going to remember things, deciding to remember some of the great things, you know, because it's going to tune you, right? And not because you're avoiding the truth, or if there is some terrible thing you need to beat yourself over the head over because you were so bad. But yeah, so it's a self-loving thing to do, to say, and it's a self-care, and that's what this whole thing is, right? Self-care, self-love, tangibly. And part of it is to look at that imagination, use it more in ways that work for you, and play with it and enjoy it, right? But just own it, that it's there, you're using it anyways, it's a power tool, and we might as well. And especially with, you know, important things like mind, mood, and mental health. Imagination, one of the biggies, but fun one. And then that's where the more you personalize all of this, just kind of go towards what ways that feels right, whatever may do that for you, that is going to be the best yoga for you, right? Because yoga just means union. So whatever reconnects you is the best yoga for you. That's basics, whether or not you get on the mat, right? So anyways, if I can help you at all in your process and bringing it home daily, let me know. That's what I do too. But otherwise, I'm just super happy to share the tools here too, as you weave it into your daily ways of taking care of you. So, okay, thank you so much for being here. I love you. Adios.